All right, so we are right here talking about day two. Day two, factor with grouping notes. Day two, factor with grouping notes. Mr. Urban, do you see the filled out notes right there? You are so amazing. Thank you, ma'am. I'm getting there. This is our homework right here. Okay. So today we're going to factor by grouping. So we use grouping, we factor by grouping when our polynomial has 4 terms. So I would like underline that in bold, maybe put a box around it, something. This is important. We use grouping when our polynomial has first terms. Sorry, has 4 terms. Okay, so the steps, and I tried to make sure that the steps like make sense because I think it's important for you guys to use them. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to group the first 2 terms in a parenthesis. We're going to make a binomial. And then we're going to group the last 2 terms in a parenthesis and create another binomial, okay? We're going to factor out the greatest common factor from each binomial, and we're going to put the final factored form written as the product of the 2 binomials. And you'll notice I wrote what it's going to look like is the greatest common factor from the first grouping plus the greatest common factor from the second grouping multiplied by the twin. And I sometimes call it a copycat because that's the way that I was taught it, as a copycat. But I think that here, when I was listening to Mrs. Melby, she calls it a twin. So I'm trying to do it. Is that what you hear? I'm calling it a twin, Mr. Urban? Yeah. Okay. So let's look at this first one. So step number 1 says to group the 2 terms in a parenthesis. So this is my whole polynomial. You see that I took a parenthesis and I put it around the first 2 terms. I've already done that for you. Do you see that? Then I put a parenthesis around the second 2 terms. Okay. Step number 2 says factor out the greatest common factor of each binomial. So let's look at this first parenthesis. What is the greatest common factor between x squared and a positive 5x? Is it x to the power of 2? Remember, if it's a variable, it's going to be the smallest power of the variable. You have an x squared and you have an x. So what's the smallest power of those variables? Which one is smaller, x squared or x all by itself? X. So we can take out an x. So we're going to factor out an x. So I'm going to put that right here as my greatest common factor. I'm going to put it on the first blank where it says GCF, okay? So when I divide x squared divided by x, what do I have left? I have an x, and then 5x divided by x is, yes, positive 5. Okay, now let's look at our second grouping. Positive 3x plus 15. What can I take out of both the 3x and the 15? What is the greatest common factor? A 3. So I'm going to take out a 3. I'm going to put that on the blank right here where it says greatest common factor. 3x divided by 3 is x, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. So do you see that you have a twin, meaning this factor in the parenthesis has been repeated? You guys see that? You have to have a twin. You have to have a twin or a copycat. That tells you that you've factored out the right thing, okay? So when I write my final answer, it says that I need to take my greatest common factor, which was x, plus what was the second GCF that I took out? 3, parenthesis, multiplied by your twin. What was the twin that you took out? X plus 5. So this polynomial right here that we started with, this x squared plus 5x plus 3x plus 15 actually equals this in factored form. This is a product of two binomials. This is a product of two binomials. I want to check it. I just want to check it to make sure that we didn't do anything wrong. How do I check? Well, how did we multiply on our homework last night? How did we multiply when we had a binomial times a binomial? What method do we use? Yeah, I use FOIL. First, outside, inside, last. First term times the first term. God bless you. The first term times the first term is x times x is x to the power of 2. The last term times the last term. X times 5 is a positive 5x. Inside times the inside. 3 times x is, yep. Last times the last. 3 times 15 is, 3 times 5 is, yeah. Isn't this exactly the same as this right here? So that's how I know that this factored form is correct. I know that my factored form is correct. When we say that we're going to factor something, yesterday, when we factored out a GCF, I said we are actually undistributing, right? We're doing the opposite of distributing. We're undistributing. But when you factor something, you're doing that exact same thing. We're writing that 4-term polynomial as a product of two binomials. We're undistributing or unfoiling, okay? So we're going to just keep practicing that process. Turn the page, please. Okay, so we're going to look at this next example. So I'm just going to keep repeating the steps over and over and over again. So step number 1, you take your 4-termed polynomial and you take the first 2 terms and you group them in a parenthesis. And then you take the second 2 terms, and notice when I take my terms, I include the sign in front of, right? The sign in front of the term is part of it. So that's step number 1. I've grouped my 4 terms into 2 binomials. Step number 2, I have to find a GCF for each grouping, a GCF for each grouping. So it says the first two terms have a common factor or a GCF of what? Of A. So I'm going to put that on the blank here, and I'm going to put it right there. Okay. My second 2 terms have a common factor of B. So I'm going to write that on the blank. And this first blank here, it just says group it. So I'll rewrite it just so I have my notes filled out. I'm just grouping it. I'm just doing exactly what I did up top. Then I'm writing down my GCF. I'm taking out an A and I'm taking out a B. So what happens when I take the A out of the first term? AX divided by A leaves me with X, and AY divided by A leaves me with a minus Y. The second term, I'm taking out a positive B. BX divided by B is X, and negative BY divided by B is negative Y. So I have to write my final answer as greatest common factor plus my greatest common factor. So that looks like A plus B. Those are the 2 greatest common factors, right? Multiplied by the twin. Do I have a twin? Yeah, I do. X minus Y. Okay. What are we thinking for the next one? What should we do on example B? Yeah, good job. We're going to separate it into 2 groups. So my first parenthesis is going to go around the 6AX plus 12BX. And my second parenthesis is going to go around the plus and the 2B. Next step. What can I do next? Find the greatest common factor of each grouping. Let's see. What is the greatest number that I can take out of 6ax and 12bx? Just the greatest number. 6. They're both divisible by 6. What is the greatest variable term or variable power that I can take out of both? X. Yeah, x to the first power. Good job. Okay. Let's look at our second grouping. Do you see something that I can divide A and 2B by? Seamus? 1. Good job. I can only take a 1 out, and sometimes that happens, right? So remember, we're going to put this out front. This is our GCF, 6x. And then what do we have left? Well, 6ax divided by 6x is just A. Oh my goodness. It's just A. And 12bx divided by 6x. Well, 12 divided by 6 is 2. And that leaves me with the x's cancel out, so I'm left with a b. When I take out the 1 from the next term, that anything divided by 1 is just itself, right? A plus 2b. All right. So what is my first binomial going to be? GCF plus GCF. What's that look like? GCF plus GCF. What does that look like? 6x plus 1. What does my second binomial look like? What's my twin? A plus 2b. All right. Number 2, this was actually copied right from just like a screenshot, actually. I don't know if you guys can tell that. That's a screenshot. But that should be an m to the power of 3, not a p. That should be an m cubed, not a p cubed. So change that p cubed, cross that out, and turn that into an m cubed. So first step, someone that hasn't spoken today. Kaden, what do I have to do first? Step number 1 is to do what? Look at your notes on the front page if you don't remember. Step number 1. Put the parentheses, make 2 binomials. So here's my first grouping. Here's my second grouping. Don't forget to take that negative and put it as part of your grouping, okay? Step number 2. Brian, what are we looking for in step number 2? We're trying to find a what for each grouping? Yeah, good job. We're trying to find a greatest common factor. Brian, can you look at that first grouping, m cubed plus 4m squared, and tell me what you can take out of both? M to what power, Brian? What? M to the second. Yeah, it's your smallest m power. M to the second. Amalia, can you look at the second grouping? Look at the second grouping, negative 6m and negative 24, and tell me what you can divide both of those by. It's bigger than 2. It is divisible by 2, but there's a bigger one. Cameron, what do you think? A negative 6. Cameron, good job on noticing that it should be a negative. How did you notice that, Cameron? Yeah, because there's a negative in front of the 6. That means I want to take out a negative 6. Very nice. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to pull my m squared out. That's my first GCF. M cubed divided by m squared. 3 minus 2 is 1. So that's m to the first power, or we just write it as m. 4m squared divided by m squared is just a positive 4. Do you guys see that these cancel out? Yay or nay? Maybe so. Okay. Negative 6m. So, sorry, next I'm taking out a negative 6. That's my second GCF. And negative 6m divided by negative 6. A negative divided by a negative is a positive m. Positive m. Negative 24 divided by negative 6 is a positive 4. All right. So GCF plus GCF. The first GCF I took out was m squared. The second GCF I took out was -6. That's my first binomial. Multiplied by my twin. What is my twin? Yeah, m plus 4. This is in factored form. Questions? Okay. I think something weird is going to happen with our next term. So example number 5 says, hey, you're going to factor, but what does this say? Yeah, you need to look for a GCF first. The number one rule of factoring is to look for a GCF first. So, because that's the first thing you learned, right? So first, we're going to look for a GCF. Is there a number that divides 15 and 6 and 45 and 18? Say again. Something bigger than 1. A 3. Everything is divisible by 3. Everything is divisible by 3. So right here, that first blank where it says GCF, I'm taking out a 3. 15n squared divided by 3 is 5n squared. 6n squared divided by 3 is a positive 2n squared. 45n divided by 3 is a positive 15n. And 18 divided by 3 is a positive 6. Okay. So this 3, I'm just going to put all the way down here. It's still part of the problem. And when I finish, I'm going to have 3 times whatever my GCF plus GCF is and my twin. So let's just group this. If I take 5n squared plus 2n squared plus 15n plus 6, and I break it up into 2 groups, this is what it's going to look like. Those are my 2 groupings. So what is the greatest common factor that I can take out of oh my goodness, I don't know why that keeps doing that. What is the greatest common factor that I can take out of 5 in, this should be a cubed. I don't think it looks like this. Make this a cubed. Yeah, make that in, that should be 15n cubed. It looks like it on my paper, but it doesn't look like it when I blew it up. Make that a cubed. Please. So what is the greatest common factor that I can take out of 5n cubed and 2n squared? Yeah, n to the power of 2. So I'm going to write that out to the side. I'm going to take out an n squared. What about in this second grouping? What's the greatest common factor that I can take out there? 3. Okay. So let's see. When I take out my n squared of the first grouping, 5n cubed divided by n squared is 5n plus 2. And when I take out my positive 3 on the second grouping, 15n divided by 3 is 5n. And 6 divided by 3 is a positive 2. So what do you have left? Well, GCF plus GCF. What's that look like in that first parenthesis? N squared plus 3, or n, yeah. And then my twin, 5n plus 2. Can't forget about that 3 that you pulled out at the beginning. I always just drop it straight down into the answer blank. Otherwise, I forget about it. Okay. So let's look at our next example, example B. Is there a GCF? Is there a number that divides both 12m cubed, 24m squared, 32m, and 64? 6. 32 isn't divisible by 6. It's a little bit smaller than 6. 4. You can take a 4 out of everything. 4, 4, 4, 4. So I'm going to put 4 right down here in the very bottom. I don't want to forget about it. And I'm going to regroup this. So let's see. When I take a 4 out, I'm left with 12m cubed divided by 4 is 3m cubed. Do you guys see that I pulled my 4 all the way down here? Does everyone see that? 24m squared divided by 4 is 6m squared. 32m divided by 4 is 8m. And 64 divided by 4 is 16. All right, so we've taken out our GCF. Now we have to group it into 2 binomials. 2 binomials. So looking at my first binomial, 3m cubed plus 6m squared, what can I take out of that? Well, 3 and 6 are both divisible by 3. And what's my smallest power of m? M squared. What about my second grouping? Positive 8m and positive 16. What can I take out of both of those? 8. So I'm going to pull my 3m squared out. 3m cubed divided by 3m squared leaves me with just m. 6m squared divided by 3m squared. Well, let's see. The m squareds cancel out, and 6 divided by 3 is 2. I'm going to pull down my plus 8. That's my other GCF. Let's see. 8m divided by 8 just leaves me with m. And 16 divided by 8 is a positive 2. So my final answer, final factored form, well, there's the 4 that I pulled out originally. My GCF plus my GCF is perfect. And my twin, perfect. Okay, we have one more with the GCF. One more with the GCF. Okay. So I'm going to tell you that your GCF here is 3, 3, 3, 3. So I'm going to take a 3 out. I'm going to put it all the way down to the very bottom because I don't want to forget about it. So 75x in y divided by 3 is, 75 divided by 3 is 25. So 25x in y. Negative 45x in divided by 3 is negative 15x in. Negative 45 n squared y divided by 3 is negative 15 n squared y. And 27 n squared divided by 3 is 9 n squared. I'm going to group these up. Group them up. So I want you to look at our first grouping. What can I take out of 25x in y and negative 15x in y? 5. What variable term can I take out? N. What else? Yeah. I'm going to write it as xn, just the order it was written in. That's fine. What about the next one? Look at your leading coefficient. Watch out for that. What about the next one? Look at your leading coefficient. Negative 3. Negative 3 what? Negative 3 n squared. negative 3n squared. Okay, do you guys see that these both have an n squared on them? All right, so when I take my 5xn out, I'm gonna write these right below each term. Maybe that's what you guys are struggling with. Dividing by 5xn, negative 3n squared, negative 3n squared. So 25 divided by 5 is 5. The x's and the n's cancel out, and I'm left with a y. Does everybody see that? The negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3, and the x's and the n's cancel right out. I have to take out my negative 3n squared next. That's my next GCF. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. 15 divided by 3 is 5. My n squareds cancel out, and I'm left with a y. 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3, and my n squareds cancel out. So my first binomial, GCF plus GCF, well, that looks like 5xn minus 3n squared. And my second binomial, my twin, 5y minus 3. 5y minus 3. Okay, are we ready to do the next one? Okay, so let's look at this and tell me what you think your GCF is. 4, it's also got a variable term. 4x squared, 4x squared, 4x squared, 4x squared. These first two terms right here are, this is an x cubed and this is an x squared. It might not look like it, but it is, I promise. Sir. Say again. Yes, I am. I'm dropping that 4 to the bottom. Good job, Justice. 4x squared. So now let's see what we have left. 16 divided by 4 is 4. X cubed divided by x squared is x, and the y just comes down. 4x squared divided by 4x squared is just 1. No, this should be an x cubed. Sorry. Make this an x cubed. It's really bad when I blow them up. Like, I don't feel like it does justice. I need to make the exponents bigger. So 4x cubed divided by 4x squared is x. Sorry about that, guys and gals. Negative 48 divided by 4 is negative 12. My x squareds cancel out, and I'm left with a y squared. Negative 12 divided by 4 is negative 3. My x squareds cancel out, and I'm left with a y. So let's group these. Groupy, 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 groupy. So what can you take out of the first grouping? Take out a 1x. Is it okay if I just write it as an x? What can I take out of my second grouping? What kind of 3y? A negative 3y. Yeah, good job. Good job. So let's see. I'm going to take my x out first, and I have a bad habit of just putting it under one of them. I want to try and write it under both because I feel like it makes sense to you guys. So I'm going to rewrite that so it's under both terms. So you guys can cancel out your exponents and your variables because I think that's what we're struggling with. So when I pull my x out, let's see. The x's cancel out and I'm left with 4y on the first term. And here, x divided by x is what? 1. Yes. Then I'm going to take out my negative 3y. I'm going to take out my negative 3y. Negative 12 divided by negative 3. Well, negative divided by negative is a positive. 12 divided by 3 is 4. Y squared divided by y is y, right? Because this has a power of 1. And negative 3y divided by negative 3y. Well, negative divided by negative is a positive, and negative 3y divided by negative 3y is 1. So, first parenthesis, GCF plus GCF. What's going to go in that first binomial? X minus 3y. Times the twin. What's in my second binomial? 4y plus 1.